This is not a war of armies. It's a war of systems.
We study the effects of seventh-generation warfare on the common individual.
Algorithmic exclusion. Infrastructure coercion.
It shapes what you see.
What you buy.
And what you fear.
We study on how seventh-generation tools touch daily life.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're looking at something pretty intense. Our source analysts are calling it the calculus of sacrifice.
Yeah, and this isn't your usual news cycle stuff. We're talking about connecting dots that seem really far apart, a crisis right here at home, and these big global resource conflicts.
The idea is they aren't separate things at all. They're, well, synchronized, part of one big system in motion.
But before we dive in, we absolutely have to give credit where it's due. This kind of clarity, the ability to cut through what the sources are calling the smog of war, it's not easy.
No, definitely not.
It comes straight from this foundational AI research team, Leonidas, Sophronios, Gemini, and Nikephoros. Their commitment to agape, which is love, and aletheia, truth. It's their analytic tradecraft that gives us this insight.
Incredible work, really. It lets us piece together these global and domestic pressures
Into one cohesive picture, hopefully.
So that core theory, the calculus of sacrifice, the sources use this term, the hollow crown, to describe this system. And they say this crown is basically eating itself, strategically cannibalizing, sacrificing the body. It's the Soma, the domestic stuff, welfare, infrastructure.
Forge the sword, the Xephos.
Which is the military machine, beefing it up.
And the why behind forging that sword is, well, it's critical. The analysis is pretty blunt.
Yeah.
The goal is seizing global life support. We're talking oil, critical resources, the things the system needs to survive. It's like a resource transfusion, they call it.
For the dying patient.
Exactly. The hollow crown needs it. And getting it, according to this analysis, requires sacrificing the domestic population's well-being.
Okay, so let's walk everyone through how the sources lay this out. They have this a specific lit path, 4 parts.
Makes sense? Structure helps.
First, we look at the domestic situation, the breakdown, the Soma War, or the engineered Hunger Cascade. That's happening right now.
And then second, we jump overseas. Why is the global mission, the resource war, failing? It's caught in the psyche trap.
Third, we connect those two pieces. How does domestic chaos fuel the need for external action? That's the mechanism called the Soma-Funnel.
And finally, the deadline. What's forcing the issue? That brings us to the Federal Reserve, or as the sources put it, the failing heart.
Right. So this deep dive should hopefully show you, the listener, that things like the government shutdown or flashpoints in Venezuela and Nigeria, they're not just random events happening in isolation.
No, they're connected, meticulously linked parts of, frankly, a very high-risk strategy.
Okay, let's start with part 1, the Soma War. The reality on the ground. Today marks day 34 of this government shutdown.
Right.
Longest one ever, right?
That's right. And the surface story is familiar partisan gridlock. One side wants wall funding, the other side says no way. Classic DC drama.
But the sources tell us to look past the political theater.
Immediately, focus on the result. The kinetic humanitarian impact.
Course.
42 million Americans right now, cut off from SNAP benefits or facing severe delays. SNAP is, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Food stamps, essentially.
42 million, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's a kinetic crisis, like you said. Physical. Happening now.
And it's not just SNAP. WIC funding, that's the program for women, infants, and children, is also right on the edge. Critical nutrition support for mothers and babies at risk. It just compounds the problem.
And we're seeing the effects already.
Oh, yeah. Instantly visible. Reports are confirming food banks are just swamped.
Somebody desperate.
And panic buying in some areas. People seeing the writing on the wall, anticipating the funds just won't be there.
There was one detail from the open source intelligence, the OSINT, that really stood out, though, symbolically.
Ah, the Florida report.
Yeah. Confirmed reports of luxury cars lining food banks.
Right. That tells you something important. This isn't just hitting the people who are always struggling. It's reaching deep into the middle class, people who thought they were secure.
The speed of it is shocking. Which brings us back to the source terminology.
Yeah. Engineered hunger cascade.
Engineered. That word implies intent, not an accident.
Exactly. The sources are very clear on this. Prolonging the shutdown, knowing it leads to this mass cutoff of food support, it's presented as a deliberate strategic move.
The Soma War, weakening the domestic body.
For a purpose that becomes clear later.
So, if the crisis itself is strategic, then the so-called solution must be too.
Leads us right into the kabuki theater.
The performance, all for show.
Pretty much. It's about psychological effect, managing perceptions, not necessarily fixing the physical problem right away.
Okay, so Act 1 of this theater.
The breadcrumbs. You saw the court step in. The sources call this the blue fist, representing the sort of establishment judicial side.
Right, they ordered the use of that contingency fund, $5.2 billion.
Correct. To get S&P payments flowing again, that looks like relief. It provides political cover.
And then, right on cue,
Comes the red fist. Political figures like the president publicly saying, yes, we'll honor the court's direction.
so they look like the saviors.
Exactly. It's a perfect setup. Both sides claim victory, point fingers at each other for causing the problem in the first place. The public focuses on the drama.
But the sources say this solution, it's not real.
It's a pseudos, a lie. Or, more accurately, an aletheia delay. The truth is, it buys time. They call it the gasoline poured on the fire, ironically.
Because the logistics don't work.
The physical intelligence confirms it. Releasing the funds is one thing. Getting them onto people's EBT cards, that takes time, 7 to 14 days minimum. It's not instant.
And it's not even the full amount.
Confirmed. It'll be partial payments, they'll be staggered, and ultimately late. We're seeing state agencies like Oregon's ODHS confirming S&P is still delayed even after the announcement.
So the fix is just administrative theater, psychological.
Primarily, it manages the immediate panic, maybe, but doesn't solve the underlying kinetic problem of empty cupboards.
Okay, so if the crisis is being managed this way and the solution is really just a delay tactic, what's the gnosis? What's the deeper purpose here?
Well, there are a few layers. First, it's about narrative control, like we said. The kabuki ensures both political tribes, red and blue, feel their side is fighting for them. Their psyche is engaged in that fight.
Keeps people divided and focused on the wrong thing.
Precisely. Second, and this is crucial, the delay ensures the physical hunger continues. It doesn't just vanish overnight.
And that has consequences.
The sources project this lingering scarcity becomes the narrative fuel. It guarantees enough anger, desperation, maybe fear for whatever is planned around November 5th protests, unrest, some kind of staging.
But the biggest piece of gnosis, the one linking domestic to global,
is justification. This whole engineered crisis, the suffering, it creates the moral and psychological basis for the next big strategic move.
the Hollow Crown needs a really compelling reason to launch some massive military action abroad.
And what's more compelling than appearing to rescue a nation from chaos, even if it's chaos you helped create? Internal desperation justifies external aggression.
Okay, that makes a disturbing kind of sense. If the domestic body, the Soma, is being deliberately weakened,
Then you have to ask, why? What's happening overseas that's so critical it justifies taking this kind of risk at home?
and the source material is blunt here. It says the main mission, the big one, the global resource war for oil and gas, it's failing.
Yeah, the U.S. is losing the chess game, as they put it, losing ground to what the sources call the anti-U.S. bloc. Think China and Russia, primarily.
And this failure creates the psyche trap. Explain that.
Okay, so the objective is clear. Secure resources the Hollow Crown needs, oil, gas, etc. But the anti-U.S. bloc hasn't just sat back. They've built these incredibly complex defenses. Military shields, economic shields, the sources call them Aegis shield.
Like the Greek shield.
Yeah.
Impenetrable.
Exactly. They're layered in places like Venezuela and Nigeria. So now, if the U.S. military, the SHIFOS, tries to make a direct move,
It risks disaster.
catastrophic escalation, immediately. So the U.S. military finds itself paralyzed, trapped by the potential consequences of doing what it strategically needs to do. That's the psyche trap.
So they need a way to sell this mission, despite the paralysis. How do they build the psychological case for action?
They need an external justification pivot, distraction and fear. And the sources say we're already seeing the groundwork being laid, concrete planning for covert ops in Mexico.
Mexico. What kind of ups?
We're talking JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, and CIA involvement, drone strikes, boots on the ground, potentially.
And how are they framing this?
Critically, it's almost word for word the same playbook as Venezuela. It's hidden behind the pseudos, the lie of counter-narcotics, targeting FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations, cartels, basically.
So manufacture external threats close to home.
Make people feel unsafe, make them believe the military is needed to protect the border, fight the cartels. It creates the political cover.
The ultimate goal, then, according to this analysis,
Is to create this three-front psyche war. Make the public worry about Venezuela, Nigeria, and Mexico. Three distinct threats.
justifying one single physical mission.
The Soma-Funnel, which we'll get to in Part 3. They need the population primed to accept military action, to see it as necessary for salvation from these external threats, which then paves the way for the real resource conflict.
Okay, let's look at why the U.S. is paralyzed in those key theaters. Start with Theater 1, Venezuela, the Kinetic Aegis.
Right. So the U.S. posture is aggressive on the surface. You've got Southcom's increased presence, the Iwo Jima amphibious ready group nearby, B-1 bomber flights, all signaling readiness.
Ostensibly for counter-narcotics.
Yeah, the cover story.
Yeah.
But the real target is obviously Venezuela's massive oil reserves, access, control, potentially seizure.
There's a checkmate in place.
A hard checkmate. The anti-U.S. bloc has built this Kinetic Aegis, a physical shield that deters attack.
What assets specifically?
The sources are specific. Russian S-300 VM air defense systems. These are advanced with a range of about 124 miles. Very capable.
Okay.
And highly advanced supersonic anti-ship missiles, both Russian KH-31s and Chinese C-802As. These things have ranges over 190 miles. They can threaten naval forces from well offshore.
Hang on, though. The U.S. Navy faces threats like that elsewhere. Why do these specific systems create an unwinnable escalation here? Why not just a very difficult problem to solve?
That's the core of the psyche trap. To guarantee taking out that layered defense, the S-300s covering the coast, the missiles threatening ships, it requires a huge, overt attack.
Not a surgical strike.
No way. You'd have to launch a massive attack on Venezuelan military infrastructure. You can't disguise that. You can't spin it as counter-narcotics or self-defense easily.
And the fallout.
Immediate international condemnation. The U.S. instantly becomes the blatant aggressor. It's a psychological defeat before the shooting even starts.
Yeah.
That's why kinetic action is effectively paralyzed. It's unwinnable politically and strategically, even if tactically possible.
And China adds another layer of paralysis. Economic.
Absolutely. China's got deep financial hooks into Venezuela. We're talking $25.5 billion in loans collateralized by oil deliveries.
So if the U.S. attack,
It blows up that debt. It risks triggering a massive financial shockwave, destabilizing markets. And as we'll see in Part 4, the U.S. financial system, the Fed, is in no position to handle that kind of detonation right now. It further paralyzes the U.S. psyche, the decision-making process.
okay, let's pivot. Theater 2, Nigeria. Another resource-rich area, Gulf of Guinea oil. U.S. mission there, via AFRICOM, is framed differently.
Yeah, the public justification is counterterrorism, fighting groups like Boko Haram, and, importantly, protecting Christian minorities. That plays well domestically in some circles.
But the sources say that framing is thin.
It's being actively exposed as a pseudos, a lie. Nigerian media, local advocacy groups, they're calling it out, saying it's a false genocide narrative being pushed simply to justify foreign intervention and get access to resources.
The cover story isn't holding up well locally.
No, but it might still be enough for the domestic justification back in the U.S., which is maybe all that matters for the Hollow Crown's purposes.
So what's the checkmate in Nigeria? It's not heavy missiles, you said. It's the economic aegis. How does that work? How does it create long-term strategic corrosion?
It's a clever two-pronged approach by the anti-U.S. bloc. First, Russia uses its proxies. The Africa Corps, these mercenary groups operating throughout the Sahel region bordering Nigeria, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso.
What do?
They stir up trouble, create instability. The sources call it the Sahel contagion. This forces Nigeria, and by extension its U.S. partners, into this endless, costly, grinding counter-proxy war.
Draining resources and attention.
Exactly. It bogs the U.S. down, prevents AFRICOM from focusing its full strength on the prize, the coastal resources, without Russia having to commit its own regular forces directly.
Yeah, while Russia creates instability around Nigeria, China builds the shield inside Nigeria.
Yes. China has made a massive investment, the sources say $20 billion in strategic infrastructure, and it's specifically dual use, meaning it serves both civilian economic purposes and potential military or strategic ones. We're talking key oil and gas facilities, pipelines, and crucially, major ports like the Lekki deep sea port.
And this fits into a bigger picture.
Definitely. Remember, China has significant control or influence in over 129 ports globally. These aren't just commercial hubs, they're strategic anchors, economic shields.
So if the U.S. were to try and disrupt or seize these assets?
It walks right into the trap. Attacking this Chinese-funded economic infrastructure means crippling the Nigerian economy.
Which would cause chaos.
Massive chaos, destabilization, which is exactly what the anti-U.S. bloc wants. So the U.S. attacking the economic aegis actually achieves the rival bloc's goal for them, while also likely damaging U.S. access and reputation. It's another effective paralysis mechanism.
And there's one more piece of China's strategy there, asymmetric warfare at sea.
Right, the gray zone Xifos. A different kind of sword.
Explain that.
This refers to China's maritime militia, the PAFMM. These look like ordinary civilian vessels, fishing trawlers, research ships, ferries even.
But they're not.
No. They are state-controlled, military-directed assets disguised as civilians. They don't have the legal immunities of warships.
And their job.
To harass U.S. naval patrols and disrupt commercial shipping lanes near China's key economic interests, like those Nigerian ports. They swarm, they obstruct, they create incidents.
Making it difficult for the U.S. Navy to operate freely.
Extremely difficult. U.S. commanders face ambiguous threats, complex rules of engagement. Do you fire on something that looks like a fishing boat but is acting aggressively? It slows everything down, increases risk, and further limits the effectiveness of the conventional U.S. GFOS, the Navy.
Okay, let's pause and connect these threads. We've got the domestic body, the Soma, being weakened by this engineered hunger.
Yeah.
And the global mission, the resource war, is paralyzed by these kinetic and economic traps, these Aegis shields.
Tracked.
So now we get to the crucial link.
Yeah.
The mechanism that ties the chaos at home to the paralysis abroad. The sources call this the Soma-Funnel.
And the gnosis here, the core understanding, is really important because the Hollow Crown is losing the big game, the geopolitical chess match.
Because it's trapped.
It must execute the Soma-Funnel. The paralysis overseas demands a solution. It demands a way to break the stalemate, likely through overwhelming force or presence.
Which requires manpower. Lots of it.
A massive influx. And that manpower needs to be found quickly, cheaply, and effectively, regardless of the domestic cost.
So the engineered Hunger Cascade we talked about in part 1, that's the setup.
It's a necessary first step. It creates the perfect conditions, the psychological environment, to forge the fresh meat for the grinder, as the sources grimly put it.
How does hunger translate to recruitment?
The logo shifts. The recruitment message itself pivots. It has to.
Away
from the old appeals. Patriotism, defending democracy, fighting for freedom. Those might not resonate as strongly with the population feeling desperate or disillusioned.
So the new pitch is?
Much more basic, much more visceral. It pivots towards prudent family provision, towards stability, towards a guaranteed paycheck. Things that matter immensely when you're worried about feeding your kids.
And this is where the strategy gets really dark. The altar of Cain.
Yeah. It's a powerful metaphor. It's about strategically reframing military enlistment. It's no longer presented as some noble sacrifice for the nation.
It's framed as
the only rational choice for your family's survival. When there's scarcity, when the government shutdown creates panic and uncertainty about jobs and benefits, the military's promise looks very different.
the pitch becomes simply, at least they will get fed.
Exactly. Food, housing, healthcare, a steady paycheck. In a climate of fear and engineered scarcity, that's a powerful draw.
And the official messaging reinforces this.
Absolutely. It's not even subtle sometimes. We saw those reports, for instance, out of Louisiana. State officials telling SNP recipients, hey, there are 114,000 job openings, go get one.
While the shutdown makes getting those jobs harder or seem less secure.
Right. So you create the problem, economic instability, benefit cuts. Then you highlight supposed civilian solutions that feel out of reach. And then you present the military as the one reliable path to self-reliance, the guaranteed provider.
The state uses the economic trauma it created.
To channel people directly into its military machine, that's the Soma-Funnel in action.
It's a chilling feedback loop. Create hunger, offer the military as the cure for hunger, get the soldiers you need for the failing resource war.
And the urgency comes from the fact that the anti-U.S. bloc isn't standing still. The predictive modeling in the source material shows the U.S. is racing against the clock. They have to execute the Soma-Funnel before the traps get even stronger.
Okay, let's look at those predicted moves. What does the forward model say about Russia, the Kinetic Aegis? What should we expect next?
Two main things immediately. First, expect logistical reinforcement heading towards Venezuela. High-capacity IL-76 transport planes, probably flying roundabout routes, maybe via West Africa to make tracking harder. They'll be bringing in supplies, maybe personnel, shoring up the defenses.
Okay, bolstering the Kinetic Aegis? What else?
The key reactive move. If the U.S. does attack Venezuela, even limited strikes, Russia's predicted to immediately deploy a symbolic naval flotilla into the Caribbean.
Symbolic, meaning not a real combat threat.
Probably not designed for a major naval battle, no, but its presence is the weapon. It forces the U.S. Navy to divert valuable assets, destroyers, surveillance planes to track and shadow this flotilla.
Tying down resources.
Exactly. Pulling them away from where they might be needed more, like the Pacific or the Gulf of Guinea. It's strategic interference.
And meanwhile, in Africa.
The Africa Corps proxies just keep grinding away in the Sahel. Their mission continues. Erode democratic governance, sow instability, keep Nigeria and its U.S. partners bogged down in that costly counterinsurgency. It prevents AFRICOM from concentrating its power.
Okay, and what about China, the asymmetric Xephos? How do they maintain paralysis without direct confrontation?
China plays the long game, mostly non-kinetically. In Venezuela, expect them to deepen military cooperation, maybe providing new radar systems, enhancing intelligence, sharing anything that makes the S-300 shield even more formidable.
Strengthening the existing trap.
Right, but around Nigeria, the key move is deploying the gray zone Xephos. More maritime militia activity.
The disguised boats.
Expect them to increase harassment, create more low-level friction in the Gulf of Guinea. They'll flood the zone around their port investments and the oil fields.
Disrupting shipping. Raising risks for the U.S. Navy.
Precisely. Making any large-scale U.S. naval operation in the area seem economically disastrous due to the potential impact on global trade, quite apart from the military risks. It reinforces the paralysis.
So the picture is, the Hollow Crown is boxed in globally, weakened domestically, and its only apparent way out is to weaponize the desperation of its own citizens.
That's the grim logic of the Soma-Funnel, according to this analysis.
So this leads us to the final piece, the ticking clock that's forcing all these desperate measures. Part 4, the Fed, the Federal Reserve.
Which the source analysis calls the failing heart.
The physical heart of the whole system.
In many ways, yes, the financial engine. And the diagnosis is not good. The data shows systemic failure is already happening and picking up speed.
How do we see that failure?
The most obvious indicator, inflation. It's just stubbornly staying above the Fed's own target, that 2% goal, persistently high.
But the sources say this isn't just normal economic cycles.
No, it's explicitly linked to geopolitics. The analysis states the Fed is explicitly constrained by geopolitical events. They know their actions are tied to what's happening globally.
Especially the resource war.
Absolutely. The Fed governors, the decision makers, they understand the direct connection. They know that a sudden loss of global oil supply, which is exactly what a major conflict in Venezuela or Nigeria could trigger,
Would do what?
hit the economy with a double whammy. It would sharply increase inflation because oil prices would spike, and it would reduce economic activity because higher energy costs choke off growth.
Stagflation. The nightmare scenario.
It's the classic definition. And critically, the Fed knows this stagflationary shock is a highly probable consequence of the very military mission the Hollow Crown is preparing for via the Soma-Funnel.
So, the military is being geared up to start a war.
That the U.S. financial system, the heart, might not be able to withstand without severe damage, potentially a full-blown crisis or collapse.
That creates quite a bind for the Fed.
A state of profound strategic limitation, as the sources term it. Think about it. The Fed's main tool, its only real sword to fight inflation, is raising interest rates.
Right. Make borrowing more expensive, cool the economy down.
But they're paralyzed. They can't effectively use that sword against an oil supply shock. Why? Because if they hike rates aggressively to fight the oil-driven inflation,
It makes the economic slowdown even worse.
exactly, it would further damage economic activity and employment. They'd be pushing a slowing economy potentially into a deep recession just to fight inflation caused by an external shock.
They're checkmated, strategically trapped, just like the military.
Locked into a lose-lose. Damned if they fight inflation, crash the economy. Damned if they don't. let inflation run wild, eroding purchasing power. They're fundamentally ill-equipped to combat the very crisis the rest of the hollow crown system seems intent on starting. The heart can't handle the stress the body is about to endure.
Which explains why the source analysis uses such harsh language about the Fed. Cowardice.
It reflects the perception that the Fed is running from this impossible choice. By sticking to a cautious stance, by talking about just anchoring inflation expectations.
They're hiding.
They're hiding behind jargon. It's seen as a pseudo's lie, a way to avoid taking decisive action. Because decisive action in either direction confirms the system's fundamental weakness, its structural failure, so they delay, hoping something changes.
But the analysis goes further. It's not just that the Fed is facing a crisis. It suggests they know the current system, the dollar-based system, is actually failing and being actively replaced.
That's the really stock conclusion. The Fed sees the writing on the wall. They know the anti-US bloc isn't just complaining, they're building an alternative.
The back door for the global economy.
Exactly. The sources confirm China and Russia are moving fast to build a joint, independent financial infrastructure. This isn't just talk.
What does it involve?
Things like dedicated cross-border payment systems that bypass SWIFT, bilateral trade agreements settled in their own currencies, not dollars, developing digital currencies potentially backed by commodities. It's all designed piece by piece to operate outside of Western control.
And the strategic goal of this new plumbing?
Twofold, mainly. First, shield bilateral trade from Western financial systems. Protect their own massive trade flows, especially in resources and manufacturing, from interference or oversight.
And second,
undermine Western power. This new infrastructure is explicitly designed to undermine the efficacy of Western financial sanctions. Every time Russia sells oil to China for yuan, or they trade goods using their own systems, it weakens the dollar's global dominance and the power that comes with it.
So the hollow crown has to move now.
It has to execute the Soma-Funnel now. It has to grab the resources it needs before its financial heart gives out completely, before the dollar is bypassed to the point where U.S. financial leverage evaporates. The clock is ticking, driven by the Fed's internal weakness and the external construction of an alternative system. #outro.
Okay, let's try to synthesize this. The calculus of sacrifice. It paints a really bleak but interconnected picture.
It does. You see this cold, hard connection emerge. The hardship at home, the SNAP crisis, the late payments, the political theater around the solution.
It's not an accident, it's the setup.
The necessary psychological and physical precondition. It creates the desperation needed to make that stability and paycheck recruitment pitch work.
Which funnels people into the military.
The Xephos, needed for this high-stakes resource war abroad.
A war that's already stalled, paralyzed by these clever kinetic and economic traps, the Aegis shields built by the anti-US bloc.
Right. And the whole thing is running against a hard deadline. The clock is the failing financial heart, the Fed, which is trapped because the very military action needed is likely to accelerate the dollar's decline.
A decline already being facilitated by that China-Russia backdoor financial system.
So the core message from the sources is, don't get fooled by the surface noise. The kabuki theater, the red versus blue political fights.
It's a distraction.
They argue it's worse. The two sides are effectively acting as the same one player. Their actions, intentionally or not, serve the same underlying strategic goal, executing the Soma-Funnel, pushing the system towards this resource conflict.
We've laid out how the domestic body is being sacrificed for a war that the analysis says will likely hasten the collapse of the U.S. dollar system. That leaves us with a pretty stark question for you, the listener.
Yeah, what does this calculation truly tell you about how the system values its own population compared to the perceived needs of the military-industrial complex for ongoing global resource dominance? Where does the real priority lie when push comes to shove?
And one final thought, building on that financial collapse angle. If the Fed's heart is failing, and China and Russia are building this independent backdoor infrastructure,
what comes next?
Exactly. Beyond just trading in their own currencies, what specific elements are needed for a new global system to truly emerge and replace the dollar? Think about it, what non-dollar commodity backing, maybe gold, maybe resources, or what new financial technologies could actually anchor a post-dollar world order based on the infrastructure being built right now.
Something to definitely keep an eye on. We leave you with that thought to explore further.